Okay.
And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Write With Us Live. I am Alan, and here is Ariana. Ariana will be facilitating today. Ariana, do you want to say anything about your workshop?
Sure. Well, I think before we get into like just workshop things, um, if everyone tuning in, if you could drop a comment in the chat, say hi, let us know where you're tuning in from, and let us know if this is your first time tuning into the workshop series, or if you've been here with us for the entire, what is it, like 5, 6 weeks? I don't even remember at this point. Um, 5 weeks. Let us know, yeah, where you're coming from, and if this is your first time tuning into the workshop series. Today's workshop is on silence, speaking, and power. So we're going to be thinking through um, how writing can be powerful for the individual as well as for a collective group of people, and also like what is the relationship between poetry, politics, and the state. So lots of important questions. But I'm going to let Alan talk about technical things first. And like I said, yeah, say hi in the chat. Let us know. Let us know how you're doing today, where you're at.
Thank you. So for those of you who are new, the way that these workshops work is that Ariana and I are here. We see all the comments that come in. And after we do a little bit of writing, there's the opportunity to join us on video and share what you're writing. And how that works is you send us a direct message on Instagram, and we are at Write With Us Live, which you see on the screen. When you send us that message on Instagram, I then send you a link, and you just click on the link, and it brings you onto the live, and then we select when to admit you into our camera view, and then you share your piece, and we share a few words, and then we are set. So definitely follow us and Write With Us Live. And if at any moment you cannot hear one of us or there's too much noise interruption, let us know, and we will try our best to either both have headphones or one of us will take them off, but we will try to make it accessible. Usually 1 or 2 weeks after the workshops are done on live, they are captioned. So if any of you go back to them later and would like the captions, wait about 1 to 2 weeks. So yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And I did want to let folks know that Alan and I are very diligent about captioning the videos. And if you missed any previous workshops as well, you can always go back to the link that's on the flyer for them on our Instagram, and you can always access them at that link. So you can share them with people who you think might enjoy. If you missed something and want to go back to it, or want to hear one of us read poems again that we shared, you can always go back and watch those videos. We do officially have captions up for the very first workshop, Radically Tender. So if you want to watch that video with captions, you can now do that. So for today, I'm just seeing everyone's comments of where you're tuning in from. Thank you for letting us know. It's so cool to see, to sort of feel connected when we are so disconnected from everything right now. Yeah, and shout out to everyone who has been with us a couple of times leading up to now. That's really exciting too. Okay, so for today, what did I want to say? Yeah, so as usual, we have a Google Doc that you can follow along with for the workshop today. We'll be projecting that screen sharing in the video, so you don't need to follow along on the Google Doc, but if you want to, you have the option to do that. And you can find the link for that in the description box right below this video. So you can click on that from there. If y'all could actually try clicking on that link and let me know if you can access it. There were some issues I had with it earlier, so I just want to make sure that everyone is able to see that who wants to. Before we get into any writing prompts or discussion, I want to start. What do I want to start with? I want to start by saying But today's workshop is adapted from, there are a couple of like different big ideas that I've been sitting with for the last like few weeks. And I wanted to make today's workshop a place where we could sort of talk about those ideas and how they show up in our writing and politics. Yeah, and just check in with each other about those things. So thank you for letting me know that the Google Doc works. If anyone has issues with it, please let us know in the comments. So in crafting today's workshop, I was really thinking about two pieces of writing that have been sitting with me for a while. The first is the Audre Lorde Questionnaire to Oneself, and that's linked on the Google Doc and I believe in the YouTube description as well. The Audre Lorde Questionnaire to Oneself is a series of just a few questions created by Divya Victor that's based on the writings and teachings of Audre Lorde. The second piece of writing that influenced how I was thinking about today's workshop is an essay called Poets Should Be Socialists by R.M. Haines. That's a critique of the literary academic system. So it's a lot about like the relationship between poets and the state or government that often funds our work and allows us to be visible. And so we'll be talking about, I'll be bringing in some ideas from Poets Should Be Socialists later on in the workshop, but I wanted to let you know that as far as the theoretical basis of where today's workshop is coming from, I was really thinking about these two things in particular. So the next thing I want to do is talk to you about this book. You know, we love to share poems on Write With Us Live, and this week I wanted to talk to you about a chapbook of poems called Grown by Claudia Wilson. Claudia is actually my neighbor, and I think she's one of the like coolest people. Yeah, this is a very short chapbook. There's only a handful of poems in here, but it was one of those books where I read the whole thing in one sitting and then I just kind of cried really hard after I finished it. Not because I think it resonated with me in a very like visceral way. And at the time I hadn't read a book of poems that had done that in a while. And so I think about this book a lot. I'm going to read two poems from Grown today. And if you like them, the link to purchase this chapbook is also in the YouTube description box and on the Google Docs, so you can find the information there. I'm going to start with a poem called Broken Hymn. And this poem, Claudia grew up in the church, in the Baptist church in Cleveland. And this poem has lines from the gospel song 99 and a half. So if you know that song, then you'll hear the lyrics from it that are coming through at a few moments in the poem. So we're going to start by reading Broken Hymn by Claudia Wilson. So it starts with one of the lines from the song, which says, "Lord, I'm running, trying to make 100, because 99 and a half won't do." So Broken Hymn by Claudia Wilson. I sing in the choir because I love the Lord. Ain't no hymnals in the pews because the songs are in our hearts. You memorize what you sing to the Lord. Lord, I sleep in red stains, the color church mothers say whores wear. I'm running, I pray, I must sparkle if I want God to accept me. I must be so clean, God can touch me without getting a finger dirty. God says, fast and pray. I tell God I'm hungry. I like to eat. My favorite food is barbecue wings with sauce sweeter than a hymn, trying to make 100. I repent about my dreams of naked women and penises, because 99 sins. Am I responsible? Inside me, images rise to the top of my head, a blood kite, no string to grab. I pretend I have no desires, and angels are proud. And a half. I see the most beautiful girl at my job, brown skin and hazel eyes, come up the stairs like she ascended. Her love smoke turns me in, out like a message from the prophets, playing in the dark swirl of my bones. I love God. I love God like rest loves a nightmare child. Me, a girl waiting to sing the solo, picked because the choir director says it is time to sing. Won't do. Will people believe me when I say I'm running? If my singing isn't convincing, then it's not real. Loving God, is it just a way to transfer my desires and dreams into spiritualities and testimonies? I want to be so pure that my heart is holy. I want to be the perfect pitch, singing soprano. So that's Broken Hymn by Claudia Wilson. I think there's a lot of things happening in this poem. Before I jump into the few thoughts I have, I just want to invite Alan to respond if you have any initial thoughts that come to mind.
Absolutely. Thank you for introducing us to Claudia Wilson's work. I did take some little notes down. I think the note that I'm sitting with right now that I just want to kind of explore is I pretend I have no desires. And the ways in which I think that as a writer, when I first started writing out, like I couldn't also write about my desires or anything like that because I was like, oh, that doesn't matter, right? And then hearing somebody else express that, I think that it makes sense, like the ways in which we're conditioned. And I think a lot about citizenship and what it means to be like a citizen. And also how desires is part of like, to be a citizen, like you can't have desires, right? Because the nation decides everything for you and you want what the nation wants. So I'm just kind of like sitting with that. So thank you. You're on mute. Okay.
Okay, y'all can hear me now. I'm glad you mentioned that part about desire too, Alan, because I think that's sort of what grounds me in the poem. And is I think how I follow like the logic that Claudia is employing here. And it also makes me think about how like the repression of desires, like the silencing of those feelings, what like the conflict that produces in the person whose desire is being suppressed by whatever institution or community that's doing the suppressing. And so in this context, the scene is in a Baptist church, a Black Baptist church, right? And then the conflict that silence produces like affects how Claudia in the poem like is viewing their relationship with God and with faith. As well as community that's tied to those things. So I want to think about
I am working on getting that fixed. Give us 1 second while we work on this. Okay, so right now, I'm unsure what happened, but I think Ariana will be logging back in. And while we wait, I guess. Okay, Ariana is back in.
Okay, I'm not totally sure what just happened.
Me neither. You had frozen, and then I took you out of the stream, and then I added you. But then when I added you, it was just a black screen on my end.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure what happened after.
Okay, I think it might have just been like sometimes our internet goes out for like 2 seconds and it just like needs a break. So maybe that's what it was. But you know, we're here. We figured it out. Everybody is present. Thank y'all for staying present with us through that. And we back. So I think I was saying something about, oh yeah, thinking about this poem, Broken Hymn by Claudia Wilson, and how it leads into the themes for today's workshop. This poem for me is an example of someone receiving a message that they will only be accepted or welcomed in a space if they silence parts of themselves. And that act of silencing produces then a conflict between who the person is or what the person believes and access to safety or acceptance in a space. So I want you to think about, actually, I'm gonna share my screen now because we're getting into the prompts for today. Let's see. Okay, so this is the Google Doc for the workshop today. And you can access it in the YouTube description box. If you want to, I was trying to show you all this the last time I led a workshop, but I can actually do it this time. I'm gonna make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see. Okay, so if you have this Google Doc open on your computer and you want to actually type in it and edit it, you're gonna have to save a copy of it on your own computer. So what you can do is when you're in the Google Doc, just go up to the left where it says File, and then you can scroll down to where it says Make a Copy. Now, if you hit Make a Copy, it will just copy and paste everything that's on this document into a new document that you can edit. Or you can also scroll down to where it says Download, and then you can open this document in Microsoft Word if you want, and just edit it from there. So you have some options on what you decide to do. Okay. So my question for you right now that I want you to answer on whatever surface you're writing on, if it's a notebook, your computer, whatever, is when was the first time someone tried to silence you? And how did you respond? So I have a few minutes, but I just want you to answer that first question. Okay, go ahead and come to a stopping point. All right, go ahead and come to a stopping point with your writing. I have another question for you, and the question is, when was the last time or the most recent time someone tried to silence you, and how did you respond? After we answer this question, we'll take a break and talk about the differences between those two things. But this is your question for now. Go ahead and come to a stopping point. Go ahead and come to a stopping point wherever you are in your writing. And in the chat, if you could just let us know what that process of writing about those things felt like for you. And if you feel comfortable sharing a difference maybe that you noticed between those two moments for you, if you could share that in the chat as well. Alan, I'm curious if you wouldn't mind letting us know how writing about those two things was for you.
Yeah, to answer your question about the difference that I noticed, I definitely, the first time I experienced silence, you asked, like, the follow-up question was, how did you respond? And the first time I experienced it, I just didn't respond to it, because after being silent, I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I have to do what I'm told. I think I was 7 or 8 in that moment that I wrote about. And then the second time, the second question, the last time someone tried to silence you, it was different because it wasn't in person. It was through an email, right? So thinking about how now I could respond, and it took me a while, but I did respond to that silencing. So yeah, I was like, damn, there's so many different ways of silencing. You don't even have to be there to silence.
Yeah, and I think so many different things that prompt like the act of wanting to silence somebody. Like for me, the first memory I have of like someone trying to silence me, it was at a very early like birthday party. It was at my birthday party, and I had like friends of my family who were white, and one of the children, we were pretending to play like Power Rangers in one of the bouncy houses, and he punched me in the face and my nose started bleeding, and he tried to get me not to tell my mom, and I was like, my nose is bleeding. Like, what am I gonna do? So I definitely like said something then. I couldn't have been more than like 6 or 7. But I feel like the more recent times where people have tried to silence me, I think has been related to my work and the things I talk about in my work. And I think, yeah, I think in a lot of ways I haven't been as vocal about those things. But yeah, I think I'm starting to see comments coming in. We're very much interested in knowing what that process of writing about that was like for people. It seems like most of the folks who have responded so far have responded to those moments of being silenced with accepting that silencing. And sometimes we accept silence for safety reasons, right? Like sometimes that is the choice that helps you survive a situation. So I don't want to think about silence as necessarily like a skill that's not useful, because I think it can be at times. I think maybe the thing that's helpful is knowing when it is useful and when it's not, perhaps. So thinking about our own experiences of silencing, I want to transition into thinking about community. Yeah, I think particularly in the way we've been talking about silence so far, I think it's often like people outside of our community or people who don't have experiences like we have that are often trying to silence us. And so what happens then when you consider your relationship to the people who are like you? And thank you to everyone who is sharing right now. Yeah, a lot of people are speaking about emotions as something that are silenced. I think particularly for children. I want to. I mean, a thing I feel like that is coming up in a few different responses that people are having is that moment of silencing. It's generally not a pleasant experience, right? For a lot of folks. I feel like these are a lot of hard moments that are coming up, and for some folks, these are our earliest memories of shame as well, which I think ties back to what we talked about in one of Alain's workshops earlier. And so I want to transition into thinking about like if those early moments of being silenced were other people's attempts to shame you as a person. Or to shame what you believe or who you are, what happens? I want to transition into thinking about what happens when you like reinvest in the self. And so I'm going to read another poem from Grown by Claudia Wilson. And thank you so much, yes, for everyone who's been sharing your experiences so far. So this poem is called Sayings. It's again from Grown by Claudia Wilson. And it's the very last poem in the chaplet. So this is how it all closes out. And it opens with a quote from a spoken word poet named Oompa, who I believe is from the Boston area. And the quote from Oompa is, "Well, you know, just like they say, wherever 2 to 3 people are gathered together, there the hood is in the midst." So this poem is called Sayings by Claudia Wilson. "Whatsoever you do unto a black girl, you do it unto the Lord. Whoever gives a cup of cold water to a black girl gives it unto the Lord. Whoever cornrows a black girl's head and henceforth who greases the scalp does it unto God. Whatsoever you do to one of us, you do to all us. You do it unto the Lord. A black girl is a church, a flowing skirt, a white glove, a communion wafer, a handkerchief, waving, a scary ass aisle to walk down and give your confessions to. Hallelujah. Whatsoever you do, if you take from the Lord. If you hurt the Lord. Your flowers will not bloom. Your teeth will rot. Your voice crack and splinter into 1,000 blisters. Whoever gives unto a black girl shall reap a harvest. Many men will give unto your bosom, pressed down, shaken together, shall your cup runneth overeth again and again and again. She'll blow on you and say, receive the Holy Ghost. She'll turn your peaks into valleys. All your children, community folk, Ray Ray and the homies, haters, folks who owe you money will call you blessed, blessed, blessed. I just want to invite Alan. I feel like I was seeing facial things happening on your end. So what are your initial reactions, Alan?
Yeah, I feel like I always have facial expressions. Wow. Whatsoever you do to one of us, you do to all us. It's one of the first phrases that I wrote down. And this idea that I think that the way you set up, like how silence produces conflict, right? If we're silencing somebody else, then we're not just silencing them, but like whoever is around them or whoever's in relation to them, in community with them, kind of like the idea that silence has not only a domino effect, but actually like it's about units of people. And the way in which the poem transgresses or just progresses from the ways in which silence has a domino effect to being blessed, right? So you identify the silence, you kind of don't accept it, and you speak of it in order to get to that moment of being blessed, or that moment of a resilience that shouldn't have been needed in the first place. Like a speaking back to power, a taking back of power.
Yeah, I really like you mentioning the domino effect of silence. I think you mentioned in your last week's workshop on visual poetics, that no individual exists alone, right? Like you don't come into being by yourself, and like the person that you are, the art that you create, everything you do up to this point is influenced by the people that you have been in contact with. And so thinking about that, my next question for everybody is, who are you trying to honor in your writing, and what is your relationship to them? And I want to think about this question. There are a million ways to answer it, but particularly if you are someone who lives at the intersection of many different oppressions, not just one, not just two, not just three, but maybe there are a lot of power dynamics and oppressions that you experience that affect your daily life. I think it's also okay if the person that you're trying to honor most in your writing is yourself. I want to make that clear, because this is not something I would say to like cishet white men, right? Like all of us, this is an open workshop space, so we don't know where everyone is coming from in this space, but yeah, I want to keep that in mind with answering this question, that I think for some folks, if the person you're trying to honor most in your writing is like your 6-year-old self, that's also okay. But yes, this is your question for now. We'll have a few minutes to write and come back. Go ahead and come to a stopping point. Wherever you're at, go ahead and come to a stopping point. If there's anything from that question that you would like to share in the chat, who you are trying to honor in your writing and what your relationship to them is. One of the other reasons that I asked this question is because, yeah, I feel like one thing that's also true when it comes to writing is that just because you can write about a topic or a subject or a group of people doesn't always mean that you should, particularly if you don't have a relationship to them. Because I think there's a quote by Arundhati Roy that I really appreciate, which is that there is no such thing as the voiceless, only the deliberately unheard or the preferably silenced. And it's this idea, it's sort of like correcting this liberal idea of that, like that one person can speak for everybody, or that it's really important to talk about other people's narratives because they need to be uplifted, when usually what should happen is that those people, for the most part, can speak for themselves. And so we should actively seek out their stories and their work so that we are hearing from people directly and not hearing an interpretation of someone else's experience from someone who doesn't experience those things, because that can actually be really harmful. So yeah, I wanted to say that little piece right there, because I think that often when we talk about writing, we can sort of talk about it in these vague terms of like, oh, writing is so powerful, writing is so revolutionary. But I think writers also have a responsibility, not just to themselves and not just to the communities they write for, but also to the communities that they don't write for. How are you in community with other people? Your work can't just be for yourself, right? I don't think it should, if the goal is liberation at the end of it. Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, Alan, if you have any thoughts that you want to jump in with, or if you want to say who you're trying to honor in your writing as well.
First of all, thank you for orienting us into the ways in which poetry is not just something that's nice, right? It is political, and it's high stakes, and narrative matters. As far as the people that I'm trying to honor, I kind of just was jotting about how I think that my work is very much about displacement and those who have been displaced. And when I identified it was about people who have been displaced, I realized that that's such a broad category of people. And because your follow-up is, what is your relationship to them, right? And for me, it's like, okay, well, my relationship to the displaced, primarily the displaced, whatever that might mean, has traditionally been just other like Black migrants that I know. And I think it was like, oh yeah, like we're differently displaced. So I also have to think about that. What does it mean to be differently displaced? What does it mean to think about time, how long we've been displaced, or where we were displaced from, the relationship. Yeah. So the different textures of displacement. So I feel like this is going to become feels like it's going to become an essay. So thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, there are so many thoughts and things like surrounding these ideas as well. And I feel like for for me, like a good example is like writing about like my experience of Blackness is a thing that comes up in poems, but my experience of Blackness is not a stand-in for every Black person's experience of Blackness, right? And it's actually really important that for myself as a light-skinned Black person that that's not the case, and that I make it really clear that that's not the case in my work and in my practice outside of my work as well. Yeah, so I want to, part of me like wanting to teach this workshop is to sort of get away from the very like vague ways we have, I think, of talking about writing, and because I mean, obviously, right, I think writing is important. I like to write poetry. I think it's an important and useful like thing to do, and hopefully if you're here, you also think that. So I'm not saying that like poetry is useless and has no place. I'm not saying that at all. I do think that poets can work harder to develop an ethics and a responsibility to other people. So in thinking that, and I appreciate everyone's comments that are coming in as well, I want to think about the next question, which is not necessarily a writing prompt, but is more like a thing that I want to share some thoughts on, and then we can get into another writing prompt after that. So this is really a question that I've only started thinking about recently because I didn't know to consider it before. But I think particularly coming from a place where if you believe that poetry is really powerful, not just for the individual, but that it can be powerful for a group of people. And I come from a performance background, so I know and see and can feel how a poem can change a room full of people, how it can shift like how people are feeling and what they believe. So I've always thought of poetry as powerful for the collective. One thing that I haven't always known to think about is what is the relationship between poets and the state? What is the relationship between poets and a capitalist market in which they have to sell and promote their poems? And so I want to introduce just a few like ideas here that are mostly coming from the essay "Poets Should Be Socialists" by R.M. Haines, which is again linked in the Google Doc. If you just scroll down to the bottom of it, the link is right there. And R.M. Haines also has a Twitter account where you can follow him and his work. But I read this essay and I was like, ooh, here are some things that no one has ever presented to me before to think about. So I'm sharing them with you so that you can't say that anymore. So the first thing I want to think about is like sort of the relationship between funding, publishing, and like fame, or like who are the like famous poets that you might know of. I had never thought before to look at who funds like the publication of poetry books, who funds poetry presses. If you look very quickly, do like a quick Google search on like what is the relationship between the CIA and writers. I did not know that the CIA funded the Iowa Writers Workshop, which became the basis for most poetry MFA programs in the United States. That seems to be widely known. No one had ever told me until a few weeks ago. So that feels important to mention, particularly if you are a poet who believes that your goal in writing and in your life is to actively advance the goal of liberation, right? If you are writing and living in a way that you want everybody to be free, what does it mean then to be a poet? Submitting work to presses who might be funded by the US government, particularly if you are writing work that you feel like is against the US government, then what? So I'm not sort of like trying to present any answers here. These are more questions, I think, than anything else. And if you are interested in these ideas, I definitely recommend that you read that essay, Poets Should Be Socialists, because it traces these histories in a much more thorough way than I can do here. So I want you to consider the idea that the state determines which poets and writers are the most visible, the most funded, and the most supported. I just want you to consider that poetry, because it exists in a capitalist marketplace, it is in relationship to capitalism. So I want you to think about that. The second thing I want to offer as well is like, the fact that poetry exists in a marketplace, right? In order for someone to be published, it means that someone else wasn't. A lot of poets who publish books, we submit our work to like contests, which is a replication of like capitalism, right? We all compete for the same resources, for the same access to resources. When you submit your poems or your poetry manuscript to a press, you are competing with everyone else. So the very fact that there is a winner of a publication contest means that there are losers. There are people who didn't get that opportunity. The same thing with writers' fellowships and retreats and residencies and all of those things. Poetry is not immune to those kinds of influences. And so there is an elitism that's present there, particularly because a lot of those contests require payment. You have to pay submission fees so that someone can read your poems and maybe pay you for them later. Which automatically disadvantages working class people or people who don't have disposable income, right? So there's a lot there, and those are just like some few quick points that I wanted to bring up. Yeah, because it troubles the idea that like all poetry is inherently like liberatory, right? It's not just the content of a poem that is important to look at. It's also what are the means of production for this poem? How did it get circulated? Yeah. So I'm just gonna put that out there. Like I said, if there are more, if there's more you want to learn about that, I want to direct you to that essay, Poets Should Be Socialists. And I feel like a lot of people are open to hearing these ideas right now, particularly with everything going on with the Poetry Foundation, which if you don't know, you're not really missing anything. So my point here is just to say, be critical. That if I feel like most people know that money runs everything and that we live in a capitalist world, I don't want you to think that poetry is an exception to that. Period. Okay. So with that idea, I want to move on to this question. And this is going to be a quick writing prompt, which is like, what political actions can you take to advance the goal of liberation? And this might feel like a vague question. I think that's okay. But what I want to consider is that poetry can be a companion to like political action and can supplement political action. But poetry itself is not political action. It can be political. And so I want to think about like, what are things you can do outside of poetry or with your poetry that help us advance the goal of liberation? I'm gonna just give a few minutes to write on that, and then we'll come back. Okay, go ahead and come to a stopping point. Okay, go ahead and come to a stopping point wherever you're at. I don't want to take a whole lot of time to discuss this because I want to make sure we have time for the writing prompt as well. But I just wanted to say that if that question felt difficult to answer in any way, my suggestion here is that you get in touch with grassroots political organizations in your area because, yeah, there are a lot of people that are already doing organizing work toward liberation. So I think sometimes people feel like people who are just coming into it, I think sometimes feel like they have to have all the answers of how to tackle everything. And I'm here to remind you that you don't, that there are a lot of people who are already doing this work, who can point you in the direction of where you are needed and how you can help. Liberation is a thing that requires a lot of people, not just one person, to do labor for that. So if that question felt hard to answer, I suggest taking time to look up what organizations are in your area, or if you don't know how to find them, maybe talk to someone that you think might. I find that people are really willing to share those kinds of resources once they're asked for them. Okay. Yeah, I just want to check in with you, Alan, real quick to see how you're feeling and if you had.
I feel good. I also think you might be frozen. Okay, I think you came back. Okay, you're back. Thank you for sharing all that. I mean, I definitely think that it's important for everybody who is watching this live stream to know everything that you just shared, particularly because I think that part of Write With Us Live is trying to respond to that, right? Like the ways in which MFA programs don't allow most people we're in community within, and how there's so many gatekeepers. And one of the things that you said, I mean, when you asked the question, what is a really, not what is the relationship between boys and the state, but this one, what can you do to help achieve liberation? I was kind of thinking of like, what else can we do with Write With Us Live, right? And it's like, I understand that this is kind of the first time we try something like this, and I acknowledge that it's like a monolingual space that is limited to the people you and I have read, the books that you and I own, right? So it's such a limited space, but I think that those limits are full of possibilities as well. So I think that I'm just really committed to the next couple of sessions. I mean, Ariana and I talked last Sunday, and we really made a political commitment that these next 4 writing workshops were going to involve our politic and our analysis of the world, and not just like poetry as the start. It's like poetry plus who we are as people. So thank you for that. Yeah, and I think I'm ready for whatever you have coming or whatever you want to do next.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned all of that, Alan, because part of the goal of this workshop is to get folks to think about, that your politics should, like, in my view, I don't think that that a person's politics should start and end with their poems, and so I wanted to get people thinking about how can you make sure that your politics are clear and that you are acting on them in ways that exist outside of poetry. I think poetry can be immensely powerful, and I don't think it's enough for us to achieve liberation. We need more than that. So the next thing I want to think about, I want to give everybody time to respond to a writing prompt, and then whatever time we have at the end, we can use for sharing. And so your writing prompt here is keeping in mind everything that we've talked about and all the responses that you've made up to this point. I'm going to ask you to write a poem in response to the question, why do you write, and why is it important for you to write? There are a few more questions on the Google Doc here. that might be helpful to consider as well. And so the first additional question to consider is, what else, like besides writing, do you need to learn or to do in order to fight for your people fiercely? Excuse me. So I want you to think about, when you said earlier who you're trying to honor in your writing, are these people that you're also trying to fight for? And there's a caveat here, which is that, the idea that liberation is all of us or none of us, but it won't take just fighting for your people for us to achieve liberation. We have to fight for everybody who is oppressed in this world. This is also my way of like advocating for research-based poems. It's not enough to have a politic if it's not informed by anything. So what else do you need to learn or to do besides writing in order to fight for your people fiercely? The second question to consider is, how is political action and mutual aid also a way to use your voice or your body to fight for people? So the initial prompt is, why do you write? Why is it important for you to write? And the other questions are sort of getting at, how can your politics be made clear and show up outside of your work as well, or in addition to your writing? So sit on these questions. If any questions for you come up, let us know in the chat. We're going to write for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll check in after that. Okay, go ahead and come to a stopping point. Go ahead and finish up your last thought, your last line. I'm curious what that writing process was like for folks. So if you could let us know in the chat. And Alan, if you wouldn't mind sharing what that writing process was like for you as well.
Thank you. Yes. Before I share, I just want to remind you all, if any of you would like to jump on the live, would be a great time to send us an Instagram DM while I share with Ariana. So that way, once I'm done sharing, I can look to see if we have any DMs. Yeah. Writing this felt like a good reflection. I'm currently writing my artist statement. I keep telling people I'm transitioning from being a writer to being a visual artist. And I'm writing like a art statement as a visual artist. And this was so helpful because I really was like, okay, when was the first time that I kind of started to write? My earliest memory of writing. And it was interesting because it had nothing to do with school. It was about me like growing up and always being home alone and always having to go to the library because it would be the safest place I would be the entire day. And kind of this idea of I didn't speak English at the time, but also I didn't speak proper Spanish. I spoke like people used to tell me when I was younger that my Spanish was hard to understand because it was like from southern Mexico and it was like a variation of like different languages, not just Spanish but other languages. So this idea of nobody could ever understand me and I was always so lonely, so I just like wrote because I could understand me. So writing for me was like a way that I could caretake for myself, but it was also a distraction from like my material reality. It wasn't just like, oh, I like to write. It's like, I'm so lonely and I'm always home alone and I'm a foreigner in a different country. Yeah, but like, I think that after I learned English, like writing betrayed me and I had to betray writing. Because now that I was legible to people, people kept like trying to change my narrative, like change how I told my story. So I think that when you ask like, what else do you need to learn to fight for your people fiercely? I think one of the things that I would like to learn is Or I would like to identify for myself the first moment where my narrative was changed for me. Because I still don't think I know when that first moment was, when somebody changed my narrative for me. Because when I was young, I knew who I was in my like bad Spanish. But after I got more language, I began to know less. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm just sitting with that. I think hearing you phrase it that way, that once you got more language, that you began to know less. I think hearing it in that way helps me understand, like, because it's almost like that's the opposite of what we are told like literacy will do for us, right? Like that's the opposite of what we're told about like language. Yeah, like particularly in a Western sense, right? Like to know language, to be able to master language, to have mastery over it. Yeah, that then when we become sort of like all knowing, that then there is no idea, there's no thought, there's no philosophy that's inaccessible, and it's just not true. I think hearing you phrase it in that way helps make that clear. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Did you have another thought?
Oh yeah, just I think sometimes we replace our gut feeling with the language we think we have or the language we think will explain, and then we like avoid the gut.
It makes me think about like in Black feminist theory, like the idea of like how like the Western world wants to separate thinking and feeling. And in Black feminist thought, like the idea is like thinking with feeling, right? That like feeling is a thought, even if it doesn't have language to it. Yeah. 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 Yeah, which I think also sort of like ties into this like thread in the workshop today, that like language and poetry is not always enough um, to get us on the road toward liberation. It can help us maybe take a few steps, but it's not the thing that is going to propel us like over the finish line. And I feel like I want to tell poets that all the time. I want to tell writers that all the time. We're coming a little close to time. We're not going to have as much time for sharing today, but if there's anyone who wants to share either what they wrote to this writing prompt that we had, or like one of their responses to any of the questions that we asked today in the workshop, can you please send us a DM on Instagram at Write With Us Live, and Alan will message you back and send you the link so you can join in on our end and share live what you wrote. Additionally, if folks want to share like in the comments what you wrote to this question, or to any of the other questions for today, we're also open to hearing that. But yeah, I really do like this idea of thinking about like poetry as one tool that can help us on the way to liberation, but definitely not the only thing. And I think in a lot of cases is not even like the most important thing, which is important to remember. Yeah. But yeah, and what were you going to say something, Alan? Oh, my bad. Yeah, I'm still wondering what the process of responding to this prompt was like for folks. So if you want to drop that in the chat as well, so we can follow your thought process, we would love to hear that too. I also posted in the chat the link to the essay I was talking about earlier. Poets Should Be Socialists, because I thought it was in the YouTube description box, but I don't think it actually made it in there. The name of it is in there, but the link is in the chat. So if you want to read that and get more information on the things I was talking about with poetry in relationship to capitalism, you can click on that link.
We are going to be bringing in one person. Give me 1 second.
Okay, great. Alan, I think you're on mute.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right. Hi.
Hi. Oh, wow, this is cool. So my name is Eric. What's up, y'all? Thank you for this workshop. It's my first time joining live, and it was really lovely. So I wanted to share what I wrote for the writing prompt because I found myself super conflicted.
You might have to pause your YouTube because I think we can hear it.
Okay, yeah. There was like a weird lag going on. Sorry about that. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna just go ahead and write and read what I wrote. I write against the primacy of the written word. I write to organize and then memorize so that I won't have to write, but really just speak. I write to talk and then I talk. I speak because my ancestors lived and died. I speak because my ancestors were murdered for living. I speak because my friends could be murdered for living. I write so that I can see what I speak. I write so that the words I speak are given more space to linger. I write so that my pauses become punctuation. Maybe it isn't important for me to write, so long as my politics are carried with me wherever I go. Some people write to think, and so do I, but I also think to write. It is important to acknowledge the limits of these forms of expression so that I might push these limits, stretch them out, loosen their bind. I could write for the rest of my life, but I wonder how powerful that would be if I wrote without reading more, or living more, or speaking more. I write to expand my life, to link me together with those who sense me, but really, it's just another tool. I don't have to write to do that. I can do many other things to do that. But then again, I write because it's fun. I write because nobody talks like me. I write because everyone talks like me. Some people write to make money, and I'd be lying if I claimed that I didn't want to alchemize my paper into paper, but I write towards the abolition too of money, of capitalism, of prisons, of slavery, of the state. I write towards the redistribution of that money and the resources towards those who need it most. I write poems for this. I write songs for this. I write essays for this. I write speeches for this. I write social media posts for this. I write on my skin for this. I struggle to write for this. I go months without writing for this. I resent writing for this. I complicate my relationship to revolution, to study, to struggle with this. I write in this life often without awareness of why. I love writing for this. This too is how I live. Thank you.
That was great. I had to mute myself because I was making a lot of sounds while you were reading. Yeah, I really loved. You mentioned that that writing this felt like conflicting, or that there was conflict that came up for you in the writing process. And I feel like that was clear. There are a lot of moments, I think, where you repeated an idea and then troubled the initial statement by like changing it in different ways. And I feel like that was useful to hear, because I feel like it signaled that conflict that you were speaking about. That sometimes these things are true and then sometimes they're not. That sometimes these things are useful and then sometimes they're not. Yeah, I have a lot of big feelings and thoughts about that piece, but I want to ask Alan to jump in as well.
Thank you for that. Wow.
Thank you. I think that I was really taken by your use of lingering, the ways in which you write to linger. And I think that as people living in this moment, time is something that often we feel like we don't have because everything is happening so fast. And when you say that part of your writing is to linger, is to like reclaim that time or to just like slow time down. And you like repeat that when you say that you think to write and then you write to think, right? That's also about lingering and shifting the pace of the world in a moment where the world is in chaos and catastrophe. But you're also like, you say that you can do many other things. So you know that writing is not the only thing, but you're not necessarily resisting or insisting on it. You're moving with it, which I think it's, when one is an artist, there's this like meme going around, which is quoting like, oh my gosh, I forget who it's quoting. Maybe Toni Morrison of the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible, right? And I'm just like, people are misquoting it, first of all, because nobody should have that much trauma that they're always going to have to be responding to chaos, right? Or we shouldn't live in that kind of world. But I see you moving with it as opposed to against or through. So yeah.
Y'all, thank you. Oh my God. So I don't know how to work all the technology, but I definitely want to leave space for other people who want to share. But thank you. I just wanted to share what I got.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. We really appreciated hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, wow, that was great.
It's cool how like things can happen so fast on the internet. I don't think we have anybody else. No one else has sent a message, so I don't know if you want to maybe say a few like closing words. Oh, there's also people in the comments.
Sure. Well, I'm still like, if I have to be honest, I'm still in that poem that was shared with us, and I do feel like one of the things I wanted to say in response to that piece was there was a line that was like, I write against the primacy of the written word, right? I write to talk, then I talk, and for me that was like, I was thinking about like the usefulness of performance and how things can be communicated in performance that can't be communicated in quite the same way just through language. Like it requires the human body and speaking to other people in order to get that meaning, to make that meaning clear. Yeah, and I think just like hearing poems in performance as well, because that's sort of what we just heard, someone speaking their words to us, how that makes things, how that changes the interaction with a poem as well. Okay. Yeah, that was really exciting to hear.
It was. And thank you for the comments. It was Tony Cade Bambara who said that quote.
Yeah, so thank you, our internet siders, letting us know. If this workshop has been helpful to you, or any of the workshops in this series have been helpful to you, you can donate to Alan and I on Venmo and Cash App to support the production of this workshop series. I mentioned earlier about the relationship between poets and capitalism, and it's important to mention that this workshop series is not funded by any nonprofits, any corporations, any fellowships, anything like that. Alana and I are taking the time to develop these workshops and to put time in to facilitate them for you all. So there are no barriers to entry for this workshop. No applications, no registration, no fees. Right, but we also have to eat and live in this world, and so anything you can send, if you have extra funds, we would appreciate. And if you don't, maybe just share this with some folks who you think might benefit from it. Aside from that, am I forgetting anything? Even if the workshops have not been helpful, you can still donate. Thank you. We appreciate the support. I think that's all I have for today. Let me think. I'm like, should I share another piece? Do you want to hear one last poem from Grown by Claudia Wilson? We have time to do that. I think we could. Oh, before I do that, if there's anyone who wants to share their writing with us, but if there's not time to join the live session, you can always DM us on Instagram at Write With Us Live, and we'd like to post the writing from each session that folks send us on our Instagram page, so it's actually an archive of art that people have produced. So please send us your poems too if you would like to do that. Okay, I'm going to read a last poem from Grown by Claudia Wilson, and then we will close out the workshop. This poem, if you know the song First of the Month by Bone Thugs and Harmony, which I did not know they put out an album in 2017. I thought they were definitely just in the 90s. They went on tour in 2018. It was very surprising to me. I was like, when was the last time I heard a Bone Thugs song? It was a while ago. Like on the radio. Anyway, this poem is in conversation with the Bone Thugs song First of the Month. So the title of this poem is Hey My Nigga, We Having a Wonderful Day. So this is by Claudia Wilson. Talk about the first of the month like mothers talk about their children making it into college. The first of the month, the first of the month. All our dreams come true on the first of the month. In college, no one knows how the church organ can cradle your heart and make it give up its secrets. No one knows about the aunt you lost to drugs or the heartache you feel when you see the proud look of the dining hall staff who are Black and look at you like they see the ghost of Harriet Tubman crossing their path, asking for the sweet potato fries. And when your family asks you for money now, like you got it, like it's the first forever because you graduated. And if you say you don't, then that means you went to school for nothing, or that you forgot where you came from. But really, you just got debt, and college wasn't free, and grad school wasn't either, and you still feel like you missed a lesson every time you hear that your cousin's or foster sister is pregnant again. It is not just a matter of them closing their legs. It's a matter of choices going away, like more bills than month, and more month than food, and choices are slim when you make them on any given day in the hood. The ghosts of your past don't leave that easily, and white social workers have their first wake-up call when they realize they are white in class, and you're like, damn, they just now getting that shit? And you don't want one of them knocking at your people's door trying to do an assessment. And if I was a rapper, I'd be harmonizing at this part of the song, trying to convince you that there's still hope on a Monday when it's raining and you gotta go into work or no work or the streets. I'd let the beat drop too, let my fro out and say, wake up, wake up, wake up. That is a poem from Grown by Claudia Wilson. Definitely recommend. Alon, did you want to say anything?
I'm just so happy you introduced us to Claudia Wilson and that you are neighbors. That's beautiful.
I recommend this book if you enjoyed it. The link to purchase it is in the description box and in the Google Doc. You can find out. We'll be here next Sunday. Alon will be leading us in, is it a reclamation of our rights next Sunday?
Yes. It is, like, I think one of my favorite workshops to facilitate. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say. I mean, I wasn't documented for most of my life, and it's a workshop where we kind of think through rights that we have that we don't even know we have as people, regardless of the law. So yeah, it'll be a fun and, as always, social political workshop. So yeah, please come by next Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, and I saw that there was somebody in the UK taking our workshop earlier when you asked for where they were at. So wherever you're at, you can take this workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for tuning in with us. If you want to stay updated on the workshop series, we post all the information on our Instagram page. That is the best place to find out information about the series. So we will post the link and the flyer for next week's workshop the day before. So just keep an eye on that. DM us your pieces if you would like us to share them or you just want us to read them, let us know. And yeah, thank you for being here, for being present with us, and we'll see you next Sunday. Bye.
Bye.